So what we're facing here is the need for another geological theory that could move a continent the size of Antarctica to a temperate zone under 2 million years. And that's where we believe the theory of Earth crust displacement comes in.
If there was an Earth crust displacement destroying most of the Earth's population, what happened to the survivors?
After the Earth crust displacement, some areas are completely uninhabitable. They go into the frozen polar zones and nobody can survive there. However, there are some areas where people can survive. They tend to be in the highlands because people are afraid of staying in the lowlands where the tidal waves are devastating the shores. But in these particular areas that we can isolate using the theory of Earth crust displacement, we have oases of survival, and it's precisely in those locations that we find the earliest and most important crops. And it happens not just in one area, but all around the world. It's happening in South America, it's happening in Central America, it's happening in Africa, it's happening in the Middle East, it's happening in Asia, and it's all happening around that time. There's nothing that's really much older, but suddenly, after what we believe to be hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years of living by hunting and gathering, suddenly we begin to experiment with agriculture. It seems to me that all of this is much more than coincidence. We believe that an advanced civilization was destroyed. The survivors who had knowledge of agriculture brought that knowledge to the inhabitants of the local areas that happened to be ecologically stable and suitable for agriculture. And they brought that knowledge and they introduced it, and from that we ultimately got the rebirth of civilization.
It's pretty clear to me from the evidence that a common legacy of architectural knowledge was passed down from remote prehistory and spread out in very widely scattered locations around the world. Ask yourself this: if you belonged to a high civilization that had just been almost completely obliterated by a gigantic geological cataclysm, a movement of the crust of the earth, what would you set out to do in the future? First of all, you would set out to create buildings that were extremely stable, that would survive the worst imaginable earthquake. And that's what we find in these fingerprints of a lost architectural knowledge all around the world. A fixation, a desire to create buildings that would last forever, no matter what happened to them. And another thing that we find is a focus on trying to predict when the cataclysm will recur. What has come down to us from the ancient past seems to be a message that by a close study of astronomical phenomena, it is possible to predict when the Earth will again be visited by this all-destroying cataclysm.
If evolution fails to explain man's origins, then what is the answer to how we came to be? For many, the answer is found with a supreme being. For others, the answer may be found on another planet.
I did my graduate work at Stanford and got a master's degree in communications, in which I focused on science, medicine, and the environment in school. All my work in doing documentary films was in the Stanford Medical Center and the Stanford Linear Accelerator. So when I graduated and I went on into television and production and news, all of my beats were science, medicine, and the environment. And it was in that context, in the fall of 1979, when there were reports in Canada and the United States and other parts of the world, including Australia, that animals, usually cattle, but ranging through every domestic animal, were being found with strange bloodless excisions that always seemed to have kind of the same pattern from animal to animal. And I naively, at the time, thought, I will get to the bottom of this animal mutilation mystery. I was working on a documentary for Home Box Office, and a meeting had been set up and arranged by a lawyer in the East Coast with an Air Force Office, a special investigations agent named Richard C. Doty at Kirtland Air Force Base in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Kirtland is one of the United States' major weapons technology development military bases. It is surrounded by very high-tech laboratory and high technology development, very critical area in our country. When we went up the steps and into the doors, there were several sets of doors. We went through an outer door, then we went through another set of doors. You had to check in at a desk. Then you went into a set of doors where he had to hit punch locks. And as we came into the office to sit down, one of the first things he said to me was, "That documentary you did, referring to A Strange Harvest, upset some people in Washington. They don't want animal mutilations and UFOs connected together in the public's mind." And I remember being surprised that he was reinforcing the veracity of this film that I had done. And then another surprising moment came when he reached into a drawer and he took out an envelope. It had no markings on it. And as he reached in to pull out about a dozen pages of white paper, he said, "My superiors have asked me to show this to you. You can read this. You cannot take notes, and I want you to move from the chair you're sitting in to that chair." And he motioned to a big chair sitting almost in the middle of the room. And as I looked at the top of what he was handing to me, it was all cap-centered on a page with no date, however, and no official stamp, but it did say, "Briefing paper for the President of the United States of America on identified aerial vehicles." And wondering, why is this happening? Why is he handing me this? Why am I being made to sit in a chair in the middle of the room? And learning much later it was so that they could videotape and audiotape my reactions to what I was reading. I began to turn the pages, and it began with a dry summary of multiple crashes of discs and the retrieval of bodies that were described as both dead and alive. And in the description on the live being, it went into several paragraphs about how an American military man had made a decision to stay with this live, it was called an extraterrestrial in the paper. It was also identified as an extraterrestrial biological entity, which the acronym was EBE, or EBA, as this man referred to it. The Air Force man staying with this extraterrestrial from 1949, according to this paper I was shown, until June 18, 1952, when the being died of unknown causes, we, the United States government, according to this paper, learned a great deal about its civilization and that relationship of that civilization to our planet. And one paragraph that stunned me when I read it, and I can almost remember it verbatim, these extraterrestrials manipulated DNA in already evolving primates to create Homo sapien. And this was further reinforced on the last page in a series of project names having to do with our government's research, following up whatever had been communicated from what they are calling extraterrestrials. It said, "All questions and mysteries about the evolution of Homo sapien on this planet have been answered and this project is closed." And I remember reading that sentence 3 or 4 or 5 times after having read the other sentence about the manipulation of DNA in already evolving primates. Does that mean that they would take a woman, go in, get with some sort of an instrument, take out an egg, as has been described by abductees, put it in some kind of a machine, mix it up with some kind of extraterrestrial DNA? Does it mean the old Bible, the Old Testament description of the time when the gods found the daughters of men fair and appeared to come and to commingle at night? Is that the way it was done? I don't know. A lot of people say, do you really believe that there are extraterrestrials? Well, the word believe should not be an operational word in any of this discussion, because I feel that you have to give deference to eyewitness testimony. And there have been eyewitnesses around the world for at least 40 to 50 years in multiple countries who have been describing almost the same type of creature. All of these people in the United States, Canada, Mexico, Central America, South America, Australia, the Canary Islands, off the coast of Africa, and